Good morning, P-Man Van. Pardon the slight delay again this morning. Don't know why. I think I need to update my phone now. Same stupid thing. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Morning, Justin. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Joe. We got a great show. I think today might be one of our best shows ever. We're going back to basics, talking about all that needs to happen for World War III to end. It reframes all of World War III. That's a great thing that Bitcoin can do. It's a great reframing tool, right? But before, I just got to mention that I was out in the red sun of the morning enjoying some of that good vitamin D. And I noticed at the same time that I was out there that Bitcoin is still running. So there's nothing pressing for us to talk about other than what's in the news. So let's have a coffee and talk about it. Good morning, CK. Hope you're doing well. Oops, that was supposed to be CK, but another one came in. Good morning, Dabio. Nice sound. Yeah, it's getting better. Huh? I figured it out. It's the camera that is causing a bit of trouble right now. It's not registering when I sign in. So normally what I have to do, like you choose your mic or whatever, if you're on Zoom or whatever it is, I got to choose a camera because I can choose between the camera built into the desktop or because I have my iPhone plugged in and you're actually I'm using an iPhone for this. It doesn't register for some reason. Sometimes I have to reset, and even when I reset, it doesn't come in. I think it's just an update now. I didn't do it yesterday. I'm not an update person when it comes to the iPhone, but they're going to force me. They're going to force me. But that's okay. You don't need to hear the boring stuff. You're here for the fun stuff. And the fun stuff starts with Moscow time. Moscow time. Moscow time. Oops, yeah. We are going to be doing, it's a little bit of fourth turning. It's not really the focus of the show today too much, but it is a good frame. I wanted to put the 80-year blocks in there just because it is relevant. But we're not focusing on fourth turning too much, although it is a great frame. Moscow time today starts with Pokemon. You know Pokemon? It's a fun game. My kids play. They like it. Right? Pokemon actually comes from Japanese bug catching culture, which my father-in-law was a big fan of. And he was a bug collector, and they had books where they keep all their bugs and all that stuff. But what happened was a poor fella was at a Pokemon championship, and the teenager who was just trying to play turned out he was disqualified by the adult judge. So there's a young teen playing, and an adult judge decides that because he awkwardly laughed when the judge asked him his pronouns, he was kicked out. He didn't get to play. He was gone. For real. That happened yesterday. What a world. Now, the story everyone's talking about. So, do you remember I made this is about the Restrict Act now? The story is so absurd. It's pretty absurd. It's pretty absurd. So, the story that everyone is talking about today is the Restrict Act around TikTok. Now, do you remember I made a prediction? I'm not going to ask you guys to repeat the prediction that I made, but here's the prediction that I made when we were talking about Pokemon and Pokemon. What am I talking about? When we're talking about Restrict Act, or at the time the Texas plan and TikTok and how their lobbyists were going to show. Here was my prediction. If you don't remember, we were going to see an A game. We were going to see lobbying like we haven't seen as far as quality and skill and talent as ever before, right? So, what's happened since I made that prediction? Well, first of all, they had their congressional testimony. And I'll say, if you didn't see it last week, it was one of the rare times where Democrats and Republicans seemed to be working together. They seemed to be on the same script, and it looked like they were beating up the TikTok CEO. And there was all kinds of people who said, well, it's nice to see Congress working together. I wasn't so sure. I wasn't so sure when I saw that. Now, what I said was, if this is the A game that I predicted, they didn't do it, right? They got whacked and smashed and destroyed. And that's what a lot of people said last week, right? The TikTok CEO went there, both Republicans and Democrats. And I would even say understood the issue in the sense that they were talking about the psyops and the persuasion capacity of TikTok, not the diversion of data security, right? Data security is always a diversionary tactic. It's not the real issue. Where the data is being placed doesn't really matter. And indeed, you see that whole line of reasoning. Every app does it, right? Every app is the same, right? Every app takes your data and all that stuff. So my argument back then already was that that's not the point. The point is that you can brainwash so easily with this tool, and for those reasons, you got to think about what the effects are and what's going on. We talked a lot about the heating mechanism. Remember heating, where they can just hit a button and then that story goes viral or that TikTok goes viral. And we assume every social media app has that, right? We don't assume that that is such a rare occurrence and those things. One second. Pardon me. So we know that it's been an issue for a while, this heating mechanism. They can heat brains, they can get people excited about whatever, right? So remember, my prediction was you would see an A game from TikTok, you'd see something that was appropriate for the usefulness of the tool. And so when everything happened last week with the testimony, it didn't really look that way, right? It didn't really look like TikTok had really brought a formidable countermeasure to regulatory threats. And it looked like TikTok had been the first thing that unified American legislators and Congress in a bipartisan way. Well, what have we seen since then? It's amazing. So what we've seen since then, and this is what Tucker Carlson did his story on it 2 days ago, and it caused a deluge yesterday of people commenting. And what it turns out is the Restrict Act is actually just another Patriot Act on steroids. It gives the uniparty or the centralized American government or the federal government or whatever you want to call it, Democrats, Republicans, everyone, a brand new tool to censor Americans and any social media site, So everyone picking up today that just the use of a VPN alone to counter US censorship. So the same thing that Chinese people use every day to get around the Chinese firewall would in fact become illegal with 20 years in jail. 20 years in jail. So lots of people commenting on that today. We've got David Lee here. The land of free speech finally beat China on censorship. People in China use VPN all the time. Using VPN for TikTok in America will get you 20 years in jail, more time than manslaughter in many states. Jason Williams, going parabolic, who all Bitcoiners know, also brought attention, saying a minimum 20-year sentence and a $250,000 fine for using VPN to access banned apps. So it's not just TikTok. The thing applies to any app that they say is in national interest, national security. Those are the triggers, right? So Balaji said the same thing. The Restrict Act is the American Great Firewall. Become China in the name of beating China. The Mises Caucus says the Restrict Act is not limited to just TikTok. It gives the government authority over all forms of communication, domestic or abroad, and grants powers to enforce any mitigation measure to address any risk. To national security now and in any potential future transaction. So Niraj Agrawal, if you guys don't know him, he works for Coin Center in DC. He said the Restrict Act creates blanket authority with few checks to ban just about anything linked to a foreign adversary. It creates powers similar to OFAC sanctions, but with fewer checks and avenues for review. Niraj says, just as the OFAC's legislative powers, we do not object to sanction-like powers being used to target foreign entities. If an overzealous secretary argued that a crypto network is a foreign entity, we would fight that. Cryptocurrency belongs to no one in particular, and that should apply. Ian Miles Jong as well says so Still Gray, who we often comment on the show and quote, the Restrict Act, which is ostensibly being put in place to ban TikTok, is actually a Trojan horse for full government surveillance and a total end to your right to privacy. Beyond providing the government with the ability to moderate and censor what you say online on any social media platform, It also provides the government with full access to all your encrypted passwords, private data, and your failure to comply can result in up to $1 million in fines. He's exaggerated here to $1 million in fines. And the thought that I had when I saw all this come out was this is more or less what I predicted. You would see something that was so incredibly different and so incredibly powerful out of the TikTok hearings that you would see a type of A game when it comes to lobbying and persuasion. And what we see here is clearly TikTok and other US entities using the occasion. And that's why I think you saw a uniform approach last week in Congress, in the sense that they seem to be seeing the issue in a bipartisan way, but in the end, it was a power grab. So whether or not TikTok, and you're seeing now that the ability to even deal with TikTok alone is gone, right? So personally, of course, not a fan of TikTok, would love to see some form of at least assurance that the heating button isn't used for political purposes or other that, whether or not it can be stopped, who knows, right? I don't really think so. But with this law here, this is way worse. I mean, it's way worse than anything that TikTok could accomplish. So either TikTok's lobbyists have found a way to poison any affront on TikTok, creating, we've got Justin here saying, no way this passes. So no, agreed. No way it passes. I'm not here to get you all worried about Restrict Act or anything like that. I'm just showing you how an A game of lobbying works. This is it. This is it, right? You find a way to prey on the ambitions and power lust of Congress. They go way too far. They create a bill that is absolutely unwieldy, and TikTok dances away from all of this. There's no way they're ever going to get caught up in this business. This bill is so unpalatable to most Americans. Now, I agree. I don't think it's going to pass, but crazier things have happened, and the uniparty is a real thing. And who knows, right? Now, I predict no way. I predict no way. But remember what my prediction was 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or whenever it was when we were talking about heating and all of those functions and what would happen to Twitter in the end. Even the piece they have with Oracle, the Texas project, they call it, right away you're seeing the data security diversion turned into a big patriotic thing, right? Oracle, Texas, we're going to house the data there. There's no way we're going to be involved in politics. But here's a bill sponsored by both parties, and everyone's interested, and all kinds of people want this. And what are you going to get in the end? The bill's not going to pass. And I don't think we're going to be able to deal with TikTok now in any way other than all these blanket statements, all these coded messages. Republicans hate it because they don't got style, right? They don't have the ability to be charming on the medium. You're going to hear all of these crazy ideas coming out. And I don't think you're ever going to be able to deal with the actual problem. Now, it is a huge power grab on the part of Congress. And again, I don't think it's happening. I'm not worried about this law passing or anything like that. But think about the conversations that are going on, and think about where TikTok would feel, if you're that CEO who was smashed in the face last week from Congress, and now you're seeing how people are dealing with it. Are you laughing? You won, right? You won. There's no way this is going anywhere. And to me, this is what an A game looks like, right? It looks like something that was never going to pass, got everyone excited, made people think there was something going on, and then all of a sudden, it's nowhere. So I said A game when it comes to lobbying and what TikTok was going to do, and what we got is something that I'm definitely filling in blanks here. I'm definitely saying, well, I don't know who in Congress had the idea for the Restrict Act. I don't know who in the executive branch had an idea for a Restrict Act. Looks like people who didn't think it through, didn't really assume that this thing was going to be taken seriously, or didn't know any better. Who knows? Or was it planted by TikTok itself suggesting, well, if you're going to do it to us, you got to do it to everyone, which makes it an absolute poison pill. And even seeing everyone compare all the different apps that are out there to TikTok, well, Facebook, every app takes your data. These are all just, I think the MSNBC had an article today that it's just targeted advertising, that it's the same thing as targeted advertising, right? That everything that TikTok does is like targeted advertising. So therefore, no big deal, right? It's just like getting your information and giving you algorithmically some stories that you might be interested in. So, yeah, it's well, here's the catacombs. Pay attention to who votes yes, even if it fails. Yeah, sort of. But I think anyone now who is engaging in the TikTok debate, AOC, for example, saying, oh, it's about, of course, it's racism and it's against kids and all these other things. I think you can start telling who's bought off by different folks, right? Who has been receiving money, who has been engaged by TikTok, and a follow the money analysis, I think, is easier now that all of these talking points have been released. And I think you're able to see what's going on a little better. Pay attention to who votes for it. I don't know if it's even going to get that far, frankly. I haven't seen the actual legislative track, right? This is just a proposed bill, so it'll have to go to committee, and I don't think it'll pass even that reading, right? That's usually how, in the Canadian system and all the laws that I've been involved in pass in that way. They get submitted as a bill, they get first reading in the chamber, and once first reading is over, the bill's sponsor will bring it forward. The person who believes in it will bring it forward. They'll read it. They'll help coordinate lobbying with people who might be on the fence. They'll find out who's on which side. But then it gets sent to committee, where the sponsor will have to testify in favor of the bill, of course. And that launches the whole process of legislative enactment. And in our system in Canada, second reading is what comes out of the committee. And then third reading is the end, right? Once the bill is read a third time and you have a whole chamber debate, then it gets voted on and it turns into law or not. I think the US system is more or less like that. I don't think it's so different, but that's the system we have in Canada. And I think it's pretty similar in the United States. So that is what a game looks like to me. I'm filling in some blanks here, definitely, but this is what I said was going to happen. They were going to do something that we haven't seen, and it would help them survive whatever else is going on. It should just be a simple case, right? If you believe the testimony from last week, when Republicans and Democrats seem to be singing out of the same songbook and seem to be, I was actually like, wow, they did their job today. It was one of the first times I had no complaints about how Congress was able to deal with a difficult issue in a way that was useful for Americans. And what we've got in the week since makes me think that everything that we saw in that testimony was part of a larger plan or a larger strategy. And the strategy looks like there's no way we're getting anything on TikTok because it's going to be mired in all of this other stuff. And that's fine, right? I'm not that afraid of TikTok in a sense that I think we're moving to a world where the normal psychological persuasion won't quite cut it. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the show today, right? So TikTok, definitely a worrying thing, but what we've seen in the last week says it's not gonna be gone, right? It's going to continue to involve itself in American affairs. Now, what I want to talk about next is this sort of weird coincidence, right? This weird, maybe simulation coincidence, that at the same time that we're having sovereign debt issues and trillions of dollars in debt, and we need a huge boost in productivity, right? We need a huge boost in productivity with the amount of debt, with the deflationary forces that are coming with technology, with the inflation from the money printing. We need some form of productivity to come in and help with the trouble. David Sachs says the exact same thing. He says an economy that's over $30 trillion in debt needs the productivity boost that AI is going to give us. And indeed, isn't it funny, right? And this is a Scott Adams quote. What are the odds civilization would develop robots at the same time the human population is collapsing? That's a signal we are in a semi-scripted reality show in a simulated world, right? Now, it's the same when you think about Bitcoin in the context of everything else that's going on, right? Just look at what's the storm that's brewing, and Bitcoin can meet it, right? Just look at the storm. We've got now today China. China's cities, this is from the New York Times, are buried in debt, but they keep shoveling it in. If you didn't know the way China did all this construction boom, it's because the cities themselves were able to take on a lot of debt in order to build infrastructure and incentivize the creation of all of these empty apartments and all of these things. And now the bill is coming due. And Jonathan Cheng says here, for decades, China's local governments were the envy of the world. They seem to have unlimited resources to binge build airports, roads, and industrial parks, many of which were funded by selling land. Now, many of them are in fiscal disarray. Not only that, you get the whole story around the Belt and Road and China's heavy debts that are going into that. So this is what's going on with the Belt and Road. I saw a lot of Belt and Road stuff in my time in Asia years ago at the beginning of Bitcoin and all that stuff. I did a tour of Asia to help educate people on Bitcoin in 2016, the summer of 2016, and met a lot of folks in Hong Kong. And I met one guy who organized the original scaling Bitcoin shows. His name was Pinder Wong. And Pinder helped set up the arbitration thing for website names. I forget what it's called. Some big regulatory body. It's an important thing. He made a fortune by bringing the internet to Hong Kong. He was like he was like a college student, and he found out how to be the original service provider and made a huge fortune, right? Super smart guy. Totally into Bitcoin. And I forget what his thing was, but it's the nomenclature that the World Wide Web used to fight over domain names and adjudicate them and all that kind of stuff. So he brought that skill set. That was like the first benevolent thing he did after becoming super rich and in the 90s. And so he did this benevolent thing, helped the internet adjudicate disputes around internet naming. I forget the name. It's a big body and everybody knows it. ICANN, yes, thank you. ICANN, yes. He's one of the original ICANN guys. Yes. He's one of the original ICANN guys. Um, um, so he was the original ICANN guy, and he brought those skills to Bitcoin and helped to organize scaling Bitcoin and helped to organize what became an important platform. I've booked him for shows a bunch. And I went over and hung out with him in Hong Kong on that trip. And he was setting up a Belt and Road initiative for this reason. This is why he did it. He believed he could force Hong Kong to be the main jurisdiction for all commercial relationships that would entail the construction of the Belt and Road, which would basically force everyone into a common law contract, which would be a huge mitigating force against what China was proposing with the Belt and Road and forcing all contracts into the Chinese legal system. So it was a very Machiavellian way of approaching it, and I was very impressed with the idea. So I said, let's look into this. So I did a bit of research for him and just sort of thought around this stuff. Now, none of us knew Hong Kong was going to get taken over as quickly as it did, and Hong Kong is no longer a thing, right? It's just a Chinese city. Despite all the news you hear about Bitcoin and that's all true, right? They're definitely going to try and use Hong Kong. China is going to definitely try and use Hong Kong in a similar way that it was once used as a proxy for mixing the legal systems, mixing the financial systems. But and it looks like there's a lot of energy coming back to China because of that momentum, and it looks like there's a lot of folks that are interested in doing it this way, right? So. Now that the Belt and Road has sort of fallen apart, we're starting to find out that it's another one of these big financial black holes that are seemingly springing up all over the world, right? We've got sovereign debt as this huge problem, right? It's not just the debt of Chinese cities. It's the debt of their country. And Jonathan Cheng goes on to say, China's emergency support for its Belt and Road borrowers has ballooned as foreign governments struggle under heavy debts, highlighting the extent of Beijing's bad loan problem as it works to overhaul its overseas lending strategy. The scale of its often opaque assistance to borrowers in distress means Beijing has set up a new system for international rescue lending alongside the IMF and other Western institutions. This is here to stay as long as debt distress and the Belt and Road Initiative are around, right? So we don't know exactly the position of Chinese debt, right? And all of these construction banks they've set up and all of these loan facilities they set up, but it's huge, right? It's a massive number, right? A massive number. So take that sovereign debt and look at what's going on in Japan, right? Tur Demeester says, look at Japan as the canary in the coal mine. He gives an analogy, and you can't do this, right? You should never do the thing where you take a household debt, a personal debt situation, and compare it to a nation. But it's still good for perspective, right? It's still good for perspective. It's not accurate, but it's good for perspective. And this is what it looks like. So he says, Japan government's finances if it was a household. $31,000 a year annual income, $100,000 in annual spending, $700,000 in outstanding debt. With rising rates, its 2023 debt servicing cost is expected to become 35% of annual tax revenues. That's the big worry in the United States as well. Sovereign debt becoming too high for the actual budget of the country to ever manage. That all of the budget in current tax collection just goes to paying for the debt from previous generations. And here's the news today that the deputy bank governor in Japan says if the 10-year bond climbs to 2%, which should be there, right? The Bank of Japan will suffer an unrealized loss of about $50 billion on its balance sheet. Now, we are living in the first moments now, the Wall Street Journal reports, where the Fed Reserve is actually losing money. That's the first time in its history. Right now it's happening for a similar reason to this, right? Now, within all of that context, right, what is Japan, just as Tur suggested, Japan is the canary in the coal mine here. So what else did Japan and this governor and the Bank of Japan say yesterday? Well, here's what they said. They need a CBDC to offer the public a safe digital payment system. So as we all know, the CBDC is sitting there looming as a solution for central banks to all these troubles. So go back to the AI argument and how we need productivity and robots and all these things. So just as we're facing a human decline and demographic problem, we've got this technical solution. And just as we're facing a sovereign debt problem, we have this technical solution, Bitcoin, right? And you can see it throughout the system, right? We have another fella yesterday, and Senator Loomis was grilling him. He's Michael Barr, who's involved with the bank. I don't even know what his title is. I should have got his title, but he was there testifying yesterday. And of course, can't answer the question. We had Cynthia Loomis, Senator Loomis, who speaks regularly at Bitcoin shows, Bitcoin 2021 and Bitcoin 2022. We haven't booked her for Bitcoin 2023 in Miami yet, May 18th to 20th. But we do have plenty of other politicians just wanting to change it up. If she comes along, she can, right? But we've got other people who can do a similar job, even though we love her and she's great. So she was grilling him about the business model of fractional reserve lending. And of course, they can't even answer the question anymore. So Michael Barr says that, you know, the banking system is sound. The banking system is sound. It's safe and sound. And, you know, she had a very simple question, but he had to move back into projecting that it was fine, right? Now, at the same time, all these BRICS countries, right, that are gathering together, moving into a position to counter U.S. influence around the world and banking influence. Again, think about the problem they have with China, right? You don't just get to choose America or China and you get rid of all the problems. Each of these big countries has a similar problem, Japan included. They all have an incredulous reference for their economy, which is their money, right? It's not credible. No one who's trying to preserve their wealth would believe these people. So it might work for some if CBDC is the basis of it, but in general, it's got weaknesses, right? So um, those two things together put us in this psychological and economic war that I have been mentioning as the battlefront of World War III for a long time, right? World War III, and we had the Kremlin's psyop media projection machine from Putin release a talking point that we've seen spread throughout the system in the past couple of days. They call it a hybrid war, right? A hybrid war. So Sergei Glaziev says the world is entering the most dramatic period of transition, characterized by the culmination of the global hybrid war initiated by the United States and the inevitable collapse of Pax Americana. Um, and then he goes on, having exhausted its potential, the American centric financial and economic system is decomposing. The world hybrid war unleashed by Washington is, in fact, its agony, right? Now, we have all these talks about the position of the US dollar. In this case, the Russian minister was referring to the protests in France and saying that that was another symptom of the US dollar's losing its position as a coordinating mechanism, as a way to make people work together for commercial relationships to propagate into the future, and that force was gone. And the other quote from Sergei Glaziev was, the global hybrid war unleashed by the global speculators and parasitical world financial oligarchy will not save the financial system from collapse. The center of development of the world economy has already moved to Southeast Asia. So at the same time, you get the Americans, weirdly, another simulation wink, talking about hybrid tribunals in Ukraine to punish Russians for war crimes. Right, so the word hybrid is sort of running all around today for some reason. Who knows? People talking about hybrid stuff, right? And so what I did was I asked ChatGPT to write an essay, which I will share with you, and it has to do with the board here, right? So one of my predictions about what will change as we go through World War III is simply this, right? At the Revolutionary War time, you would have said, when the United States were just formed, the United States are, right? That's how you'd have said it. The U.S. are. That was how everyone said it. If you watch Ken Burns' film Civil War, which I recommend, even though Ken Burns has lost his brain and has a terrible case of Trump derangement syndrome or whatever it is, Ken Burns had a guy on it called Shelby Foote, who I've mentioned a few times. The most beautiful American accent you've ever heard. So just listening to him is fun. And he wrote the encyclopedia of the Civil War. And his major conclusion, and he says, if you don't have time to read my whole book, all you got to know is the Civil War's major effect, despite everything else about slavery and all the important things that happened during that war. If you boil it all down, if you boil it down to its basic principles, what you ended up having was this one word changed. Before the Revolutionary War, everyone said the United States are. They used it as a plural countable noun, right? States were plural countable nouns. After the Civil War, that went away. You started saying the United States is a singular noun. No more countable, no more plurality. They were a cohesive unit, and from then on, it was the United States is. To this day, you say the United States is, right? Now, 80 years later, when we get to the World War II, another big thing changes. It's not even the USA, it's not the states that were involved, it was the federal apparatus. It was the banks, it was Bretton Woods, it was the war machine, it was anything that was extra political, right? So not even elected. It was things that were created as bureaucratic overlay on top of what was going on in DC at the time. So you created all of these new departments. That's where the CIA comes from. That's where psychological operations come from. That's where all the main toolkit of the past 80 years of the fiat system come from. They come from that era where the Fed is, right? And that's how you would say it. The federal government is, right? The US federal government is. It became not only not a plural unit of reference, it became a singular unit of reference. So no longer the United States, right, which is a plural countable noun, even if you don't express it when you use the verb be, right? You would just say is. From then on, it went to the Fed is, right? The Fed is. And it could mean the Federal Reserve, but it could also mean the federal government, and it could also mean federal institutions. But nevertheless, everything became the Fed is. That was one of the major changes, right? Now, my prediction, which I think I made on one of the first editions of this show ever, was that we are going to go back to a world where we start seeing the United States are, right? We're going to change that one word, and that will be a sign that the war is over. But that's the psychological shift that has to happen. Not easy, right? Not easy. So I asked ChatGPT to write a story, and I didn't even prompt it about what to put in. I said the battlefront is economics and psychological operations, and the context of the war is between USR and USR and this transfer to this point, right? So here's what it says. It says, in today's rapidly evolving world, the concept of a third global conflict has shifted from the traditional warfare of violence to a war of economic and institutional forces. World War III can be characterized as a struggle between nation states and sovereign individuals, where the battlefront lies in sovereign debt, censorship, and psychological operations. Drawing a parallel to the historical separation of church and state initiated by Martin Luther, this essay explores the contemporary analogy of separating money and state as the defining characteristic of the unconventional war. Did I put the I did two. Okay, yeah, never mind. I'm going to read a different one. In the scenario, I did two of these essays. In the scenario you've described, I did one for separating money and state as well. But I like this one better. In the scenario you described, World War III is characterized by a global conflict of sovereign debt and psychological operations, with a decentralizing force playing a significant role. The complex battle ultimately leads to a situation where Americans revert to referring to the country as the United States are rather than the United States is. As the war unfolds, economic instability and psychological manipulation erode trust in centralized authorities. Governments struggle to maintain control over their increasingly disillusioned populations. In the United States, this growing mistrust is exacerbated by skyrocketing sovereign debt, which calls into question the long-term solvency of the federal government. Simultaneously, advancements in technology. I did not prompt anything about crypto or Bitcoin. They mentioned. Simultaneously, advancements in technology, particularly in the realm of cryptocurrency and blockchains, enable citizens to create decentralized systems of exchange and governance. These systems empower local communities and allow them to function with greater autonomy from the federal government. This movement gains momentum as Americans increasingly turn to these decentralized networks for stability and support. As the war progresses, the federal government begins to lose its grip on power. Individual states and local communities are driven to rely more on themselves and their regional neighbors for resources, trade, and security. State governments and citizen-led initiatives become more influential, and a renewed sense of regional identity develops. This shift in power dynamics and regional identity leads to a resurgence of the concept of the United States as a collection of semi-autonomous entities, rather than a single unified nation. Americans once again refer to their country as United States are, reflecting a growing recognition of the distinctness and importance of each individual state. When the war finally comes to an end, the United States emerges as a more decentralized federation, with states and local communities having gained significant autonomy and influence. The new reality prompts Americans to continue to use the phrase, the United States are, as a nod to the unique identities and contributions of each state within the collective whole. So I think that's where we're headed. And in the same way that the simulation has provided us with robots to deal with the depopulation or the demographic issue, with AI as a tool to deal with the productivity issues, we now have this other system that will allow us to decentralize just in time. Like Scott Adams says, this is more or less a wink that we're in a semi-scripted reality TV show. We're in a reality TV show here, guys. It is Jerome Powell and the federal system, which, just as this essay has said, right, that the grip on power is being lost, and forces are rising to try to frantically put Humpty Dumpty back together again, but it ain't working. Right? No one's buying it. No one's buying it. And even when you see top tier manipulation like TikTok and like its response that's going on, in the end, Americans are going to organize around things like states that they think they're safe in, around systems that they think provide them security and comfort, like Bitcoin, right? No one is going to continue with the dollar unless they get bought off by a CBDC and a UBI system, which I think is inevitable. I think you're going to have that. I don't think everyone makes it. I've said it on this show many times. I think there is going to be a world where folks are going to have to be supported if they can't make the transition, and I'm okay with that, right? I don't want anyone dying in any transition, so I think it's natural for it to go that way. But we now have this opportunity where really all we need to do is just change one word in how we refer to the United States, and it will be over. It'll all be over, right? So we're getting close. So let's see what the commenters say. Agreed. A game, didn't see it coming. Makes sense. Sadly, telehealth is TikTok. Yeah, telehealth doesn't work. But that thing on the whiteboard in the background is well, I don't know. Baloo, don't watch it. Whatever happened to all that Evergrande debt? Largest Chinese went broke a few months back. Again, they can wish away so many things, right? They can wish away so many things. Baloo, no World War One. Yeah, we're not. No World War One. We're talking about American history blocks here. Maybe you haven't read The Fourth Turning. I don't know. What about the other wars like Korea? I mean, I lived in Korea. I wouldn't put it on the scale of these wars. Didn't change America, unless you like MASH, the TV show. Vietnam, part of the Fourth Turning, part of what we're experiencing now, the lack of trust. Gulf War, what does the Fed have to do with? Baloo, I don't know if you have the IQ to watch this show. I hate to tell you. Sorry, man. We don't make exceptions for IQ here. The Fed had everything to do with World War II. I don't know what to say. Anyway, yeah, we want 100,000K, man. Well, no, I mean, we want listening, guys. We're not. This is conversational, conversational. And the first thing I see is that weird chart in the back. Looks like another. Baloo, you got to read The Fourth Turning, bro. You need it. You need it in your life. I'll recommend the best. Baloo, here's the best Fourth Turning video. Van Neistat made it. I put a link, I don't know, months ago. You don't need it, though. Just look up Van Neistat Fourth Turning. And it's definitely he's very clear. It's American history blocks, right? It's American history blocks. It's not France. It's not anyone else. So that's important. Do I think Bitcoiners? Oh yeah, Bitcoin graffiti. The Bitcoin lobby. Now it's not a pure Bitcoin lobby. It's a crypto lobby. But the Bitcoin lobby is very. I helped. I knew all these people in the early days. I would say, well, we're trying to find someone. I was definitely consulted on many of its apparatus pieces that were built, and generally was saying that person can help, that person can help. Now it's grown way bigger than what I understood even at the time. But I was in DC a few times on some of these missions and saw firsthand and saw who was doing what and how they did it and just their systems. It's a very big lobby. With the loss of the Sam Bankman-Fried piece, which I always never trusted and knew was corrupted and crappy and all that stuff. I never, I didn't count it, but remember there was a $1.7 trillion budget that mostly the crypto lobby shut down. So they have a real powerful lobby. It's not as many Bitcoiners as you'd like. It is definitely watered down with crypto. But it's not just Coin Center. There's some powerful ones. Dennis Porter has his own operation going with energy literacy stuff. Very good. The DCG group set up their own. Anyone can join, but it was spearheaded by them. the Blockchain Association. You have the Blockchain Digital Chamber of Commerce, Perry Ann Boring. That was the original with Coin Center. Coin Center is the original. The other one, Blockchain Commerce one, was after. They all have different approaches. They all sort of lobby at different times. So it's substantial. They have physical offices that are there, right? Joe, American Mafia has a competitor. It's about time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, dude. Glad you made it. Only Linux allows you to update whenever you want. Never. Yeah, I know, Corn. I know. I got to change over. But honestly, I just can't handle the learning curve of another system. That's, I think, what I'm afraid of and what I avoid. It probably isn't that bad. But I mean, all my time right now is being spent AI prompt engineer learning. Like that's enough. That's enough learning for me for now. So yeah, can you read your original prompt for that essay? I sure will. Yeah, why don't, I'll share it on Twitter later, and you'll see the prompt. The prompt was: before the Civil War, people would use the plural "the United States are." After the war, people said the United States is. Describe a scenario where World War III, where the battle lines are sovereign debt and psychological operations face off against decentralizing forces, such that in the future, Americans again say the United States are when the war is over. That was the prompt. So it was a short prompt. I did not mention Bitcoin or anything. It came up with the crypto thing itself, right? Chat GPT is Chat GPT R. Yeah. Mash was pretty good. I think they're laughing at Baloo. I love our morning conversations, Joe. The Korean War didn't change America. Yeah, it's true. Not only in it's also Ray Dalio's long-term debt cycle. Yeah. It's important. I grew up watching MASH and Walter Cronkite. Did you ask GPT-4? Yeah, GPT-4, Eric. I use GPT-4. You can choose which one now, right? 3, 3.5, 4. I used 4 today. I expected as much. Great show today. Thanks as always. Awesome, guys. Thanks for joining. I've got some Bitcoin programming to do, but yeah, that's how I see it, guys. I think it's amazing that the right forces are coming at the right time. I'm not worried about Restrict Act and TikTok. I mean, in the end, the forces to decentralize are going to be greater than the forces to amalgamate people into more hegemonic systems and monolithic systems, right? So I think we're going to be okay. Bitcoin graffiti, don't know why. Sometimes it doesn't bring up your, I don't know why that's the case. It just doesn't transfer through. All right, team. Have a great day. Thanks.